That movie. Now, here with a review for Cromwell, the 1970 historical epic starring Richard Harris, Alec Guinness, Timothy Dalton, and Robert Morley. Set in the 1640s, the story follows Oliver Cromwell, a parliamentarian and squire who, seeing the tyranny wrought on by the high taxes and irresponsible reign of Charles I, decides it's time for change and ultimately goes back to Parliament in order to try and raise awareness and hopefully change the king's mind. However, a series of events ensue that lead to the English Civil War and a battle between king and Parliament, which will decide the fate of England. The acting, of course, is made up of an ensemble cast, and as you'd expect, it's pretty damn good. Of course, Richard Harris and Alec Guinness deliver their usual great, and of course the cast is filled with other notables like Michael Jason, who would go on to play the Valeyard in Doctor Who, and Robert Morley, who you might recognise as the rich millionaire who organised the race in Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines. And of course, in his first movie role, as I recall, Timothy Dalton, years before he would become James Bond, he does a surprisingly good job. Of course, he still has the typical pretty boy first movie attitude, but it's not too big of a deal. Now, the battle scenes, of course, are key to any historical epic film, and these ones don't disappoint. These are shot well, the pacing is really good, you see from plenty of angles, and you can actually see into the carnage. You see people smashing each other with swords, spears, they even whack each other with guns. In fact, there's one shot where a guy gets speared through the groin. No joke. This film doesn't skimp on details either. The design is absolutely beautiful, which links into the action as well, since you need to clearly see the armies. It beautifully captures the 17th century with absolute detail. I mean, the Puritan costumes, the Cavalier costumes, the soldiers' costumes, whether it's the King's Army of red and white with the big feathers, or it's the Republican Parliamentarian Army with the orange, is just amazing to behold. The detail is exquisite, right down to the weapons and guns. And even down, of course, to the mustaches, which I have to say are pretty well trimmed, so whoever did the hairdressing on this movie gets points from me. And let's not forget a beautifully orchestrated score, which is most obvious at both the beginning and the end, with a fantastic choral arrangement that just really is uplifting, really powerful, and really sets the mood for the movie. And now for the script. Now, this has two aspects, the script itself and its historical accuracy. Now, like many epics, this does take some liberties with history, most notably things like the fact that the Parliamentarian Army wears orange when in fact the real one wears the red. That's right, this is, after all, the Parliamentarian Army is where the term redcoats came from. Other little discrepancies include dates of death, like one of Oliver's sons dies. In the movie, he dies in battle. In reality, he died from smallpox. Also, the film does glamorize and heroize Cromwell, who in reality, as many historians can account for, was in fact a very droll, dry, dull man who was very ruthless. Whereas in this movie, he's presented as an optimist, as a man who's simply interested in the common good, who wants to oppose the tyrannical reign of a very inept king. And that's the thing. Here, they're really, even though it's played sort of good guy, bad guy-ish, with the parliamentarians standing up for the ordinary people and the cavaliers and the royalists, you know, just sitting on their thrones and being all high and mighty, there is humanity in this story. This isn't a very Hollywood epic. We see King Charles, and while he does bad things, we see the humanity in him. He's trying to run the country the best he can, but he relies on bad advice and ultimately makes bad choices. And while Cromwell, as I said, is heroized in this film, he's still played as human. We still see him sad or happy or disillusioned as Parliament becomes less and less like the way he envisioned it, or how the king continually lies on his promises. And also, considering that it's a film that's a little over 2 hours, it moves at a good pace, and it covers all the key points. I mean, yes, it did cut out some details, like the fact that there were 2 civil wars, and that one of the characters actually dies later in the film than he did in real life. But to be fair, who seriously goes into these expecting historical accuracy? I don't. I just go in to be entertained, and this was highly entertaining. it just it had a sense of high production value, and it did. And for me, it's one of the most important movies in the history of British film. Not because it's necessarily a classic, but it showed that the British could handle these kinds of big budget projects that could rival Hollywood. And it's kind of sad that this movie isn't remembered the way it should. So, I give Cromwell the Silver Star. This is truly a well done movie. This has a lot of craft, elegance, and meticulous attention to detail to it. True, it's not truly that accurate to events, and it does glamorize one of the most controversial figures in British history, but to be honest, you don't really watch epics for historical fact. You watch them to be entertained, and boy does this one entertain. First class acting, first class bow recreations, and first class design and music all coupled together to make truly one of my favourite movies. I'm pretty sure it will be yours too.